I'm going to start sharing my screen. And what we're going to talk about today is one of the great functions and features that technology can bring, which is melding data against rules, against knowledge. And without eState, you're left to do this on your own. First of all, you need to have the knowledge. And second of all, you need to have the data. And third, you have to put them together and remember them. Well, eState has a function to do that. And it has personally saved me on numerous times. We call them advisor insights. And they're found in this exclamation point here within the circle on the left of the screen. And those are going to, what that's doing when you click on that button, and I'm going to do that in a second. When you click on that button, what eState is doing is it's looking at all of the data. It's looking at a whole bunch of rules, putting them together to make sure if there's any problems, violations, things we should think about, anything else. And so that's what it does. And so I'm going to give you an example. Here we've done a plan, not particularly complicated. Homer and Marge, they're getting, he's getting a bunch of assets automatically. There's a couple of, there's a cash legacy to one person. There's the residue to him. There's, the home in a trust for the kids to stay in until they want to buy it. And the trustee has some discretion to hold it, but the residue is going directly to the kids with no strings. So that's pretty straightforward. And lastly, if everyone's gone, we're splitting it into three, but we've created 1/3 to the spouse's siblings, 1 part in a trust for Glenda, and 1 in a trust for Greer for the rest of her lifetime, with a gift over to her kids. Okay. You would look at this and you'd say, okay, this makes sense. This is nothing to worry about. So let's see what we've done wrong or what we should worry about. So what I do is once I've kind of come up with the plan, we've done the things, before I generate or before I'm finished, I'll check my advisor insights. So I'll click on this button. Now, this lists issues, warnings, suggestions. Okay. So we have, 55 plus different rules. Let's see what it caught for us. So the first thing it caught for us is it saw that we had a non-resident as a beneficiary. And so it just wanted us to make sure that we warn the client that we can't give advice necessarily on the impact to that beneficiary being a foreign beneficiary. So it's a warning, and it tells us what scenario does that gift appear in. So to Randy Simpson, right? The next thing it does is it tells us it saw that we gave an RSP to a person directly, a beneficiary, who is not the residuary, same as the residuary beneficiaries. Well, that has dramatic income tax obligations and burdens, right? Because the burden of the income tax on the RSP is going to be flow to the residuary beneficiaries, while the named beneficiary of the RSP gets the gross value. So that's a big problem. So let's go there and check that out. So that's in the descendants only scenario. And so if we went to the descendants only scenario, oops, let me just move that over. We would see that we gave Bart the RSP. Okay. And so this is obviously something that you could do, maybe that was the plan. But what the advisor insight does do is it makes us, we've got to warn the client about that. Okay. So even if you're not the most experienced advisor, or you have your clerk doing this or whatever, this is going to pop up if the client gives us instructions that might cause problems, right? The next one we have is whenever we have a home trust or a property trust, and we say, great, let's pay the expenses out of the residue. Okay. eState saw this and said, hold on a second. There is no residue. The estate is immediately distributable in that scenario. And so you said to pay it out of the residue, there's no residue. So you might want to instead create a fund to cover the expenses. So let me just show you that. So here's the error. It tells me it's in descendants only. So I'm just going to close that. I'm in descendants only. I've got the home trust. I've got a trust, and I see the expenses are being paid by the estate, and I see that the estate payment for those expenses is the residue. So that's probably not a good idea, since the residue is immediately distributable. So what I probably want to do is create a separate fund for that instead. So pull out some money from the residue, use that to pay the funds. Now I've solved that problem. And when I go back to my advisor insights, you can see that's missing now because I didn't cause that problem anymore. Okay. So that's another example. Here's a classic one. I've got a trust gift, and I haven't included a gift over. Well, that's a Saunders and Voce problem. And so I could go to the no descendants scenario, trust for Glenda, and let's go to no descendants, trust for Glenda. Great. And I can see, go down to gift overs. Oh, yeah, I did forget a gift over. Okay, so let me build something in there. Okay. So I say, okay, I'll leave it to their issue. Great. Okay, I've solved that problem, let's say. Okay. Well, eState says, well, you may not have solved that problem, because if I go to my insufficient gift overs, it's now looked. I remember I just picked Glenda's issue as the beneficiaries of that. But it's quite right. If Glenda has no issue, we've got an intestacy. Okay. So we should include further gift overs. That's insufficient in this kind of situation. Why? Because Glenda's trust, okay, is going to continue. And then when she dies, it's going to go to her descendants. But if she has no descendants, it has no place else to go, right? Because it's not the floating shares that these shares are created as soon as Glenda is alive. So we got to make sure we give them away at the end of the trust. So what should we do? Probably we should give it to the other segments. That is, if Glenda dies with no issue, it should go to the spouse's sibling who are then alive, or Greer's trust if she's then alive. And that would solve, eState would be satisfied with that, okay? So in that case, it's gone, that warning. But we have a similar warning for Greer's trust, okay? Why? Well, we left it to her children only. And so eState is looking at that and saying, well, what happens if she doesn't have children? Like, we've got a lapse there. So we should go in and, consider, I mean, I guess you could do whatever you want, but consider adding a further gift over. Again, maybe it's to the other segments. That would put it back into the pool at the end of the trust to the other groups, and that would do it. So, it's spotting other foreign residents. We talked about the burden, nicknames. So sometimes you, in your template, you might have set it up so that it uses names, nicknames. John Smith is John. Greer Simpson and Greer Simpson are both Greer, okay? So in that situation, if you include nicknames, you got to ensure that they have different nicknames. How do I do that? Well, I go to the people and I find Greer and I put in a different nickname for Greer. Maybe her nickname is going to be Greer, Greer Junior or something, whatever we're going to refer to her as. And that would fix that error. Okay, so it's going to warn us when drafting issues are going to come. It sees that we've got disabled beneficiaries, and whether the RSP should we do something special with that, like use a lifetime benefits trust or have those RSPs go into into an RDSP for that beneficiary. So it's spotting some planning opportunities. These you can see are just kind of suggestions, right? Just kind of general suggestions. So one of the general ones that almost always comes up is, if they have, get their prior wills and any inter vivos documents. Whenever you are giving an asset gift, okay, it'll warn you about making sure that there's a good enough definition in the will for that. So whether you put it as a separate definition in the will, or you just make sure that in the clause that it's talking about the ring, you've used an accurate description. eState is always concerned about when you give a specific asset away. And so that's why that warning comes up. RESPs. So it spotted that there were school-aged kids, so anywhere up to, I think, 23 or something, and there's no RESP listed. And so it's just saying, talk to the client about whether they have an RESP now, or maybe they're going to have one and you should plan for it in the will as well. Head up planning for multiple wills if it sees you've got private company shares, future children provisions. So for example, it saw we had young kids and we didn't include future children in our draft, in our data. So let me just show you about that, because maybe the clients are going to have future children. And so when we define children, we want to also include any future children they have. How do we do that? Well, we go into the provisions tab, and where it has include future members, we would click on children. Now, whenever we use the definition of children, it would include not only living children, but also future born children after the date of the will. Okay? And so that will get rid of that warning. We forgot to name guardians. So it saw that we had minor kids, but we didn't name guardians. It saw that we had future assets. So it's just a warning, maybe make sure your powers include foreign agents. We were giving money to John Simpson, but it's not a Hall Henson Trust, for example. So it's spotting that. It saw that we gave money to Daniel Walker in a legacy. He's also an executor. So it gives us a warning about lieu of compensation. These are all things, quite frankly, without eState, you'd have to remember. Like you'd have to put that together. Oh, better remember, this guy's a potential executor. I'm giving him a legacy. I better remember about in lieu of compensation, all of those things. So that's one of the great benefits. It also checks out PCOR situations. So it saw a joint asset confirmation, a designation of assets, and they're not the same as the beneficiaries, the residuary beneficiaries. So it's warning us about that. Warning us about special circumstances, warning us that a shareholders agreement exists. And if I make a big mistake, like I don't put in any duration for a trust gift, for example, it's going to say you're missing a duration in there. Oh, okay. Let's go back and fix that. So that was in no descendants for Glenda. No problem. Go to scenarios, no descendants, go to Glenda. And sure enough, I'm missing a duration for a trust. A trust really can't be without a duration. So I better pick a duration. So maybe it's death of. Okay. So, and I've only shown you a few of these, but depending on the kinds of gifts you make, it's going to warn you. It's obviously, we have a bunch more warnings for trust gifts, which are more complicated and can cause many more issues than an absolute gift, for example. But there are things about U.S. citizens. If it sees that you have U.S. citizenship or a value, it'll warn you about U.S. estate tax. It'll warn you to do title searches if you're giving property away. So those kinds of things. That is one of the great powers of software, is that it can leverage all the data and help us make better decisions and avoid mistakes. So, and if there are, and this is a call out for feedback, if there are things that you do and you're like, oh, eState didn't remind me of that, let us know, because we'll just create an advisor insight for that exact situation. And if it's good for you, it's good for the 460 other firms that use us. So tell us about it, because we're constantly adding new advisor insights. For example, the principal residence exemption, it would look to see if we're setting up a trust for a surviving spouse for the home. And I'll just kind of show you that. It's going to make sure that let's just do Homer here. It's going to warn us about the implications of the principal residence exemption. Depending on what we do with the gift over. So for example, if I did this and then I didn't make Homer the residuary beneficiary, it would know we've got a problem with the trust. And so there'd be a warning for us about, the whatever that principal residence exemption not applying, because whatever I did was violated the rules about the principal residence exemption. So termination of use, cohabitation, so it's going to warn us, right? Principal residence exemption will not apply. So because it's not held in a qualifying spousal trust. So eState, is looking at tax issues. It's looking at probate tax issues. It's looking at PCOR. It's looking at just drafting, planning, all of those things. So provision to permit future plans. Yeah, so I mean, what I would just do, quite frankly, great question about possible RESP insights. Is there an admin or other provision to permit future plans? What I typically do is if the client says, oh yeah, we might have one, all I do is I add an RESP to the assets and then I plan for it. And that's how I deal with that. But yeah, warning would be great for future. Yeah. So that's sort of the advisor insights. And I wonder often if people know about all the features that and the power that we have in eState, but that's one that we really want you to take advantage of, because I know personally it saved me on, I always check it first, and sure enough, oh, I forgot this or I forgot that, or those kinds of things. So yeah. So I'll open the floor to any questions about advisor insights first, and then any comments. Ian, if you had any, or if I missed anything, just let me know.
No, the only thing I would just say though is it comes back to the time that you spend at the beginning pays off so much at the back end on this. And those advisor alerts are all drawn from the data that you put in at the first two steps, right? And the family tree and the assets. And so taking that time can be a bit laborious, but why it's so effective is because you've made the effort to track what the data means to the planning, and so the third thing I just say is, when I do them, I sometimes look at the list and it feels a bit daunting, but if you go through them like you just did, you start to realize, okay, oh, I'm glad that was a mistake, but oh no, that one's I didn't mean that, but I'm glad it's alerted me of that, but I've thought about it.
Right.
Those kinds of things. You don't have to feel overwhelmed by it, but it's always worth going through each one.
And you kind of get used to them as well, like, yeah, okay, I know four and four, and we're gonna, on our feature list is the ability to dismiss them and things like that. But what it's doing, of course, every time you hit that button for the insights, it's reviewing the data, the latest data, and pulling it down. So that's how it works. So it's not working in the background so much as every time you hit that button, it's reassessing the situation, and that's kind of powerful as well. So, anybody have any questions about those or anything else in the last 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, Jordy, on the compensation clause,
Yep.
where the gift to the gift to the person, they were also an executor.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm just getting over the flu, I think. But where would that be? Where would you go to address that change if there was you wanted to make sure that they took the gift in lieu of any compensation they might be entitled to as an executor?
Yeah, so you'd go to the appointments, to the compensation, right? And you'd say compensation is, maybe it's everyone except Daniel Walker.
Okay.
Okay. Or if Daniel Walker was the only one, you just say no compensation, that kind of thing. And so that way he'd get that money, and it would be, in lieu of. Now, what eState automatically does is for compensations, it assumes that you don't want it in lieu of. And it says that so if you don't exclude the compensation, if we didn't exclude the compensation at all, let me just generate a will. Then what it would say is that any gift is in addition to and not in lieu of compensation. So, because in most cases that's what we want, but that's why there's a warning there, to make sure that we catch that.
Okay. Yeah, I used them last week and it was quite helpful. Like remembered them and I'd forgotten them for a little bit. And then I thought, oh, I got to check them out because it was helpful.
It should be part, really, I use it as just part of the, what I do every will. I go to there first and before I generate, because no doubt, there's something that I want to at least, oh yeah, okay, I knew that, it sometimes makes you feel even good too. So here's that clause that gets generated unless you, dealt with it differently.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Jordy, John Dunn here. Is there any way you could consider through eState making available some of these great family and asset situations that we could have to practice on without having to create them all ourselves?
That's a good idea. I'll talk to the dev team. So like facts, just set up a few families in your sample family situations with plans, and you can play around with them, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, this one today was a great one. It raised a lot of issues for practicing. Another one I'd like to see is one that is geared towards blended families, let's say,
Right.
which is one that's obviously when it comes up, we kind of struggle with what are the kinds of plans that make sense in that situation.
So one of the things, if I make Lisa, I gotta remove Lisa. Okay, so now Lisa is not, it's a blended family here. Okay, so eState immediately will advise us that there's a blended family. Okay, and so just if we're using class gifts, right, be careful about that. It's kind of a warning of those kinds of things. We could do a session on sort of using eState for blended families and spousal trusts and things like that. For sure, that'd be great. We'll do that.
Right. That would be great. I'd also like to see a video like what you're doing with us that would be suitable to send to clients to help them input their data into eState.
Yeah, I hear you. So I think, and Michaela is on this call as well, and she leads our support and team. So that's something that we can put together. And I think we even thought we had something, but if not, that's a great idea. We'll get going on that.
And you could, if you get going on that, you could maybe make a different one for the blended family, for example, or
that's true.
maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 different ones that would be that the lawyer could choose. Oh, send this because you know some basics of this client situation, and this video would be more customized to the issues that are going to come up for them.
For sure. No, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. It is duly noted. Thanks, John. No, that's great. Those are great kind of feedbacks that we love. So thanks.
We'll get the incoming summer students on this.
Right. Right on. Well, great. So this Thursday, Ian, we're talking about part 2 of missing heirs and finding that out. We'll talk a little bit about executors insurance as well. And so hopefully you guys can join us on Thursday and again next Tuesday. And we have some exciting features coming out in the next week or so. So the big one is going to be the preview. So that'll be in place if everything goes according to plan by the end of the month. So you'll be able to see your plan, your will in advance of generating it, sort of as you go. So that's where we're at. So thanks everybody. Have a great afternoon, and hope to see you guys on Thursday.